in a new member who's an admiral. We've got our speaker who's a general. So who better to introduce these two people than our own Admiral Bill Center, one of our many admirals.
Thanks, Tom. I'm really proud to introduce these two great warriors. And on behalf of all the active duty military and veterans here today, we want to thank you and tell you how deeply we appreciate your recognition, kindness, and support. Thank you. It's no overstatement to say the decade plus of combat we've endured since 9/11/2001 has been among the most challenging, gut-wrenching, frustrating, character testing periods ever faced by our military, especially our Army and Marines. None of us are born admirals or generals. The character and leadership of these two men was forged in the fiery crucible of the past 13 years. They passed that test. We're so proud that they have both become members of our club. General Steve Lanza has already been introduced as a member, and today we'll get to know him better as our main speaker. Admiral Jeff Ruth has attended meetings, but today is his formal introduction. He's a naval aviator, a 1986 graduate of the Naval Academy. He started as an F-14 backseater. Think of Goose in Top Gun. When the F-14 was phased out, he transitioned to the A-6B Prowler and served several tours at Whidbey Island, including Squadron Command and more than 80 combat missions. He's also a graduate of the Navy Test Pilot School, where he earned his master's degree in aeronautical engineering. Now try to imagine that you've spent 20 years honing your skills as a naval aviator, and one day the Navy calls you and says, you're going back to school to study nuclear engineering. Yep. After a year of nuclear power training, Jeff was assigned as XO, the second in command, aboard USS Abraham Lincoln in Everett. That led to command of the 6th Fleet flagship USS Mount Whitney, based in Italy. His previous assignment, before promotion to Rear Admiral and assignment as Commander Navy Region Northwest, was a CO of my favorite aircraft carrier, USS Nimitz. As you can imagine, both Steve and Jeff are busy guys with demanding travel schedules. On top of that, General Lanza lives down at JBLM and Admiral Ruth lives out at the shipyard in Bremerton. Not exactly convenient for a weekly meeting in Seattle. So on those occasions when they are able to join us, sit with them. Don't be shy. They want to meet you. They're both great leaders, easy to talk to. They are humble. They don't really like to talk about themselves, but they're very eager to talk about the great soldiers and sailors they lead. On the weeks when they can attend, they'll be sending some of their terrific senior officers in their stead. Please help us make those officers welcome and take the opportunity to get to know them well. Now please join President Tom in officially welcoming Admiral Ruth as our newest Rotarian.
Yes, we are so glad to have you. Thank you. So glad to have you.
Well, Steve, it's just you and me. You ready for this? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a leader among leaders, a fellow Rotarian, and since this past February, the commanding general of 1st Corps, America's Corps, our Corps, based at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, Lieutenant General Stephen R. Lanza.
Thank you very much, and it is indeed quite an honor to be here in the largest and best Rotary in the United States. I just want to thank one more time just our veterans and the Gold Star families that are here today for your service and your sacrifice and all you have done. It is indeed humbling to be in your presence today, so thanks very much. For our Navy friends that are here today, I've got to tell you, just give us one. It's been 13 years, so before I start today, it's been 13 years. Give us one in December. We need one. All right. And for my Army friends in here today, I will tell you, this is probably the first time you've had a presentation where there's no PowerPoint. So I'm going to be up here with no slides today, and I'm going to go solo with no slides. But again, it is an honor to be here today. And I really want to spend a couple of minutes today talking about your Army, because it is your Army. We are the most trusted institution in this country, and it's because of what you do to support us every single day. And the reason we can sustain the all-volunteer force in terms of serving this country with less than 1% that do serve the military is because of what you do. And I want to start off with that today because it is so, so important. You know, the President talked about over the last 12 or 13 years, you know us from Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's how you know your military. But as we come out of Iraq to a degree, and I'll talk about that hopefully in the Q&A if you want, we're still working our way out of Afghanistan. We need to stay connected to the people we serve. It is very, very important that we don't stay behind our gates on our bases, but we stay connected in the communities that we are a part of because we are your military, both active, Guard, and Reserve, and there are some Guard and Reserve members here today because it is a total force, and it's very, very important because we are your neighbors. And I think there was an article in Time magazine a few months ago that showed a very distraught soldier on the cover of the magazine with his face all camoed out, looking through a set of night vision goggles, and it said, "A military apart." And what the article talked about was how the military potentially is growing farther away from the people we support. And I stand here today both as a citizen, both as your neighbor, and as a military officer to discuss with you today why that cannot happen, why we need to stay connected, and why we as a community must be linked to the people we serve. And you know, as you look at the world today, it is a complex world. It's a world full of fiscal uncertainty. But it's also a world right now where the velocity of instability continues. And on any given day right now, we have over, and I'll just speak for the Army today, but we have over 250,000 men and women that are serving in over 150 countries in 6 continents. Of those men and women, 60,000 of them are involved in contingency operations. Contingency operations are another word for combat operations. It's another word for men and women that every single day wake up in harm's way, wake up every single day in a foreign country, in a foreign place, uncertain of their future. And that's every single day, every day of the year in this country. And it's important that we remember that. And the world, in some cases, when we talk about the velocity of instability, is changing. We just put soldiers in Africa for Ebola. We're still in northern Africa, in the Mali area. We're in Somalia. The Mideast continues to spiral. Russian tanks just crossed into the Ukraine today. We have the South China Sea issue. So these are not issues that the military creates. These are issues that just deal with the instability in the world and the complexity in the world, and it just drives the military requirements in terms of what our nation asks us to do. Right now, as you know, we just sent another 1,500 people back to Iraq, and we're still looking at future contingency operations in Afghanistan. And as you know, the Middle East continues to be very unstable in terms of what goes on in Syria and what goes on in the northern Levant. So these are all things that drive what we do as an Army. But let me bring it a little bit closer to home here in terms of what First Corps does, your Corps right down the road here at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. We are one of 3 corps in the United States Army. There is 1 corps at Fort Bragg, 18th Airborne Corps. There's 1 corps at Fort Hood, that's 3 corps, and we're First Corps at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. We're comprised of about 56,000 men and women stationed at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, Hawaii, Japan, and Alaska. We're a globally responsive corps. We have soldiers right now in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, to name a few. And we also conduct what's called operations in the Pacific as part of the President's new strategy on being responsive back to the Pacific, this rebalance back to the Pacific. We just completed operations in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Japan. And I was talking to some of our friends from Japan here earlier today. But the President's strategy, because of the uncertainty in the Pacific, specifically on economic uncertainty and guaranteeing our lines of communications, is to keep our military forward of the international date line. So our Pacific Pathways operation has allowed us to do that. Now, these are not about military operations. These are really about how do we build partner capacity with our friends and partners in the Pacific? How do we build theater security cooperation? The role of the military in the Pacific is not so much as it is about conflict as it is about de-escalating conflict and avoiding miscalculation. Look at actions in the South China Sea, look at actions in Korea right now, and that's what the intent of our operations in the Pacific is right now. We continue these operations now as the President's policy expands in the Pacific. We have linked now with the State Department. We have linked with the interagency. We have linked with businesses to broaden our strategy of rebalancing to the Pacific, and that is one of the many things that CORE is doing, and I'll be happy to talk about that during the Q&A. What's important, though, regardless of operations globally or regionally and where the Army's going, is that there's one constant that doesn't change. And the one constant that doesn't change every single day when I come to work is that I see young men and women raise their right hand every day to take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And these young men and women that do that are your neighbors, they could be your relatives, they could be relatives of others, but they take an oath. Many of you in here have taken that oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and I find that very heartening. Because even as the military is drawing down, we still see a lot of men and women that continue to want to serve. And they serve, and we have some men and women who have served that have gone on to other challenges in life and other opportunities in life. But I think the military provides that environment, it provides the culture, it provides the climate where people can continue to serve and then eventually give back to society who has supported them in their military job. I want to take a moment here just to highlight two of those individuals. Both Medal of Honor recipients, the Medal of Honor being the highest award our nation can give for conspicuous gallantry. The first person is Master Sergeant Retired Leroy Petrie. Some of you may have met Leroy Petrie, right down the road at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, a member of the 2nd of the 75th Rangers. Sergeant Petrie was in Afghanistan, was mortally wounded in both legs. And while he was with his platoon in combat, there was a grenade thrown at him from the Taliban. Sergeant Petrie, not blinking an eye, picked up that grenade, threw it back, and in the process lost his hand. Now, Sergeant Petrie survived his wounds. He has a beautiful family, beautiful children. But what's amazing about his character is that as he was wounded and as he recovered, the one question he wanted to know is, when do I get to go back with my platoon? That was the question he was asked or answered. He wanted to go back with the people he served. And Sergeant Petrie found himself a year later back with the Rangers in Afghanistan with a prosthetic hand, serving again with the people that he was wounded with, because he needed that closure. He needed to be with the team that he was a part of, and that's a testament to his character. Another gentleman I'd like to highlight, some of you may know him, is Staff Sergeant Sal Ginta. Sal was a member of the 173rd Airborne in Germany in Vincenza. Some of you may have been in Vincenza. Well, Sal received his Medal of Honor. He is the first living Medal of Honor recipient in the Army since the Vietnam War. But I think what's fascinating about Sal is he was on 60 Minutes with Lara Logan. Some of you may have seen the segment. And Lara was talking to him, and she said, well, what kind of soldier are you? And he said, well, I'm an average soldier. She said, my God, she said, you're an average soldier. You're a Medal of Honor recipient, and you're just an average soldier. And he looked her dead in the eye, and he said, just imagine how good the great ones are. I got to tell you, it got my attention, because here's a Medal of Honor recipient telling you that he's an average soldier, and that every single day, men and women, not just in the Army, but in all the services, they're just doing wonderful things. And they're not heroes. They're really not heroes. And they'll tell you they're not heroes. There are people that are just working hard for the country. They're about service, they're about sacrifice, and they're about supporting the nation. I think anybody in here who's in the military will tell you that. They're regular people serving their nation, and very proud to do so. Let me segue here to a little bit about where the Army's going. A lot of you have read in the newspaper about sequestration and the drawdown. And invariably, if you look at history, militaries draw down in times of post-conflict. Look at history, and history will tell you that the services that have lots of manpower will draw down. And the Army historically has drawn down. We are at a point right now where we have competing demands in the world, and I talked about the velocity of instability. And sequestration, as you know, is the law of the land. Sequestration will take the military down to about 420,000 people, the lowest it's been since World War II. And I'm not here today to argue about the numbers, because we do need to draw down. But the question remains right now is that at 420,000, it's an inability of the military right now to execute the strategy that the President has given us. So the question for us becomes, well, what comes off the table? Does the Pacific come off the table? Does support to Homeland Security come off the table? Does support to the Baltic countries come off the table? Does support to Africa come off the table for instability there? the support to the Ebola crisis come off the table in Liberia. These are tough decisions, and they really have strategic significance for the country. So as we work our way through that, we've been the recipients, obviously, of the Budget Control Act that Senator Murray was very helpful in getting passed, and of course the continuing resolution that has given us resources out to 2016. But the challenge we're going to have in the future, just like you do in any business, is that without a budget, it's very hard to have a plan, it's very hard to have a strategy. So there are three things that the military has to worry about. We worry about force structure, the number of people we have, and the ability to pay them and resource them and take care of them. We worry about the money we need to build their readiness, and then we worry about modernization. How do we modernize in the future? And what's going to happen in the future is that we cannot sacrifice readiness of the force, because on any given day when you wake up in the morning, when you send a man or a woman somewhere in the world, you want to make sure they have everything they need. So what suffers probably is our ability to modernize in the future so that we don't have a hollow force. But these become some of the big issues in the future as we try to balance those rheostats and we look to where the nation is going to take us beyond 2016. Now, as we move towards 2016, we're going to have a lot of soldiers transition, and we have had a lot of soldiers transition. Joint Base Lewis-McChord will have over 8,000 soldiers transition in the next 2 years. 40% of those soldiers will stay in the South Sound area. This area is the #1 area for people who get out of the military and stay here, and I know why, because I don't want to go back. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll have a tough time going back to Brooklyn after being here for 2 years, so they'll have to pry me out of here, I'll tell you that. But as you sit around today, we've had great support from Starbucks, Amazon, JP Morgan Chase. I think you saw Howard Schultz on TV the other day and what he did for the Concert for Valor, the book he wrote for Love of Country. But it's really about helping our soldiers transition. And every day that I'm up here talking, people say, well, General Lanza, what can we do? How can we help? Hire them. Hire veterans. Hire them because they bring so much to the formation. They bring so much to your company. And I would say if you're looking for a competitive edge, hire a veteran because they understand duty, they understand loyalty, they understand the attributes you want to have in a business because they've experienced that with the culture and the climate in the military. And they bring values. They bring the values you want in your business. They bring the ethical characteristics that you want. They'll learn what you need them to do. You can teach them what they need. But what they bring are those things that you just can't teach. They bring the characters of leaders who have been forged in tough times. And they're responsible, they'll be responsive to you, and they'll be great people that can move your company forward. So I ask you to think through that as we move forward here. You know, for the veterans that are getting out right now, the unemployment rate for their peer group is less than theirs. And I think most of you know that. For the veterans who get out right now, their unemployment rate is double compared to their peers. So we can make a difference here. And I would argue when we talked to the governor about this when he came to Joint Base Lewis-McChord a couple weeks ago, Washington State right now can lead the nation and is leading the nation in helping our service members transition. So I just want to stand up here and thank you because it has not come easily. The governor has been extremely supportive. You ladies and gentlemen have been. And I think we can continue to do this because Washington State really is a wonderful place for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardmen to begin a new chapter of their life as they become citizens in your communities and they give back in different ways based on their military service. You know, in the last 13 years, and the President talked about this, we've had over 2.5 million men and women serve our nation. And about 1.5 million have left. So I ask you to think about that and think what we can do to help these men and women transition. And you know, it's funny, they're not looking for a soft landing, they're not looking for a handout, they're just looking for a strong takeoff. That's what they're asking for. And I think given the opportunity, they would do wonderful things for you here today. So again, in closing, and I'm happy to take your comments, I'm very honored to be up here today. I'm honored to be part of your community. I'm certainly honored to be part of your military and serving this great nation. And I ask you when you go home tonight to think about this. Somewhere in the world today and tonight, there's a young man or woman standing on point in harm's way. And that young man or woman probably does not know what's going to happen tonight or tomorrow morning, but he or she is doing their duty to serve you and to serve this nation. So again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for supporting our militaries and our families, and may God bless you. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Any questions? on anything at all. And if I can't answer it, I'll punt it over to Dave Johnson.
First question right here.
Yes, ma'am.
General Lanza.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm
You
sorry.
talked about the unemployment rate being higher for vets and what we should do. Why do you think that is? What is the breakdown?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think in some cases, it's people that think our soldiers have some challenges because of what they've read about behavioral health issues and post-traumatic stress. And in some cases, there's a stigma that perhaps is associated with them. And I think the second part of it is our soldiers don't know how valuable they really are. And it's a combination of both. So as we work to transition our soldiers, number one, we need to tell them the skills they have and those skills that are transferable into business. And number two, it's important for guys like me to stay connected with businesses to let them know the caliber of person they will get when they hire a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coast Guardman. I think that's the issue, Bob. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my question is, what are we doing about education for our military members who are leaving to help them to transition? The Great Society was built in part by, as we know, the GI Bill. Where are we with that?
We still have the GI Bill, and the beauty of the GI Bill, thanks for asking that, is that you can give the GI Bill to anyone you want in your family. You can give it to a child, you can give it to a relative. So we still have that GI Bill, and that GI Bill is $50,000, which is fairly substantial in terms of resources. But the more important issue is what we're doing to help our soldiers transition. We used to have, and we still have, what's called the Army Career Alumni Program. It used to be just a short few weeks. My friend in the West Point graduated in '04, may remember that program. It's now a year. And then we now have corporate mentors, corporate sponsors. We now have unions that are on the installation training soldiers. So the whole point here is that as soldiers transition, they get a year to do this. And they get a year where they're just not building a resume. They get a year where they can work with companies and businesses so that when they leave, they have a job. And that's important for two reasons. One reason, obviously, is we want every soldier who transitions to have a job. The second reason, though, is that the Army pays almost $600 million in unemployment for the first year. And that $600 million comes out of our readiness. So we want people to transition with a job. We also need to preserve our critical resources for readiness. And I would invite anybody to come down to Joint Base Lewis-McChord to look at our transition program. If you've met Colonel Chuck Hodges, we have the best transition program in the United States Army, just about 40 minutes down the road. And for some of the business people that I've met here that have supported our soldiers, I want to thank you because we continue, ma'am, to get better every day. We just had a large transition conference. We had the governor, Department of Labor, Department of Veterans Affairs, and military all working together and had a fair where people were actually leaving with jobs and not shopping their resume around. And that's the greatness of what Washington State is doing. So thanks for asking.
Next question right here.
Yes.
Is there a website, or how do people contact you if they're looking to hire a vet?
We have a website that I can pass out here from Robin Baker, who runs our Army Career Alumni Program. I will send that to the President, and we can get that out. The other thing is we have some trifolds that I did not bring today, but I will pass all that here to the President so that you can get that. But we have a website. We have all kinds of ways to get a hold of us. I'll bring that today, and I'll leave you my card as well when we're done.
General, you said that there's 8,000 troops transitioning out to 2016. I'm curious what the total troop level is at JBLM, and what are the morale and readiness issues that come with losing that many troops?
Great question. We have about 46,000 service members on JBLM. Not all of them are part of the Corps. The Corps is 56,000 in addition to what's on JBLM, but we have 46,000 just there to include airmen. As you know, we're a joint base with Joint Base Lewis-McChord. It's two issues on the transition. We have some soldiers right now that have already transitioned, and some of them have self-selected out. To be honest with you, in any business, there are certain tiers where we've already had some people out of the military. But overall, for Joint Base Lewis-McChord, and I cannot speak for the rest of the Army, but Joint Base Lewis-McChord, we've been given additional resources because of the Pacific. So our morale there is extremely high. We have more training opportunities probably than any base in the country, and that's been very helpful. But I think the challenge will be in the future is that soldiers recognize that as the military gets smaller, that the requirements to stay in become that much harder. And really, to be frank, there's going to be less opportunities for them if they do things that do not allow them to stay in the military. Those of you who've played football before know that when you have practice for 2-a-days, there used to be a piece of yellow tape in your locker. And if you've got that piece of yellow tape in your locker, that meant you had to go see the coach. What I tell our soldiers right now is that the Army continues to be a great place to serve. And whether we're going to be 490, 450, or 420, we need great men and women to continue to serve. So I ask our young men and women to do what they need to do, not to get cut, and stay on the team. And it's one of the things that we feel very strongly about, and that includes the marijuana laws in Washington State. So to be frank with you, that's exactly what we struggle with in some cases sometimes, is keeping our young men and women focused on what the mission is and not some of the other outside distractions.
Right here.
Quick question. This may be naive, but you speak so much about the other countries that have our help. Do they pay for that? Or do we pay ourselves to go
You mean
help
when
other
we do
people?
missions in other countries?
Because
we
we're out in other countries so often.
We pay. But let
we're
me
very
be
generous.
very frank with you. There are some countries, for example, Korea, that obviously pays a lot in terms of what they do to support our men and women that are on Korean soil. The Japanese pay a lot of money to support what we do on their soil. It depends on the country. And in some cases, in order to build partner capacity, to build theater security cooperation, to build trust, we have certain resources that we use to do that. And that's part of our operational funding. Again, this comes at a price because in order to do these operations, they come, and the Admiral knows this, they come out of our operations funding. So again, in order to continue these operations, it's very important that we work through the sequestration issue. But these operations that we do, Pacific Pathways and others, they come out of our funds.
Walmart currently has an ad where they advertise they're hiring 100,000 veterans over the next few years. Do you have any other large corporation advertise or hiring on such a scale as that?
Not 100,000. Howard Schultz made the statement he was going to hire 10,000 military and family members over the next few years. We have had Amazon, and I'm just talking about locally in the area, J.P. Morgan Chase, that have put out some very good numbers, but nowhere near the 100,000 that Walmart has put out. But I think watching him on TV the other day on Meet the Press and other shows, I think this is stimulating this conversation in America about what corporations can do to hire our veterans. So I'm very encouraged when I hear people talking about those kinds of numbers.
Next question here.
Thank you, General Lanza, for your time today. And I'm a small business owner, and I myself hire veterans. And I have a very good working relationship with our Department of Veterans Affairs. And I'd like to say that in our state, we have an amazing Department of Veterans Affairs. But a challenge I face, I hire Vietnam veterans and older veterans who lack computer skills. And so I am wondering if there are programs for these veterans so that they can hone their skills for the 21st century where we wish to offer them jobs, and if we can put actual computers and technology in their hands. And we have found a bit of a little bump in the road in doing so.
I can only speak for Joint Base Lewis-McChord, but we have set up a computer lab that Robin Baker has in our ACAP building to do that. I think obviously the throughput, we need to look at the throughput, but we have that set up, but I'll take that back to look at our throughput capacity, but we have set that up.
Right here.
I'd like to go back, General, to the focus on the Pacific. And when you look ahead with your leadership, what are the three most urgent issues that you're facing there?
In the Pacific?
In the Pacific.
The first one is South China Sea. The first issue in the Pacific is the discussion with China and other nations about resources in the South China Sea. The second biggest discussion in the South China Sea, or in the Pacific, to be perfectly frank, is climate control. And we in the United States look at climate control more as a business issue, more as a resource issue. In the Pacific, it deals with the security of countries. As you look at sea changes in the Pacific with different countries, it has a detrimental impact on their security and their well-being. And then the third issue is access to global commons, which means access to, access within the different domains of space, of air, of sea, of cyber, and how you control that. And is that going to be access for every country? So those are the three biggest issues in the Pacific. Again, South China Sea, climate change, and access to the global commons. Again, thank you very much. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve has also allowed us to have a visitation to JBLM sometime in April. It will be announcements will be coming, but it's going to be a great outing. I'd like to leave you with this exceptional message that honors our amazing veterans. We're going to watch a video, and I would ask you to please pay particular attention to the first 10 or 15 sentences as it sets the tone for the whole video. Joe, take it away.
3 teens were arrested today for defacing the Kensington Park War Memorial overnight. The destruction includes painted messages against the military and the war in the Middle East. The 3 teens were picked up in the early morning hours after evidence was left at the scene.
Grandpa, something wrong?
Some people sure have short memories, and those who are too young to know need to be taught. Come on, I want to show you guys something.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. These are the boys of Puente Lobo. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war. You are men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor.
In the name of God and country, I learned to defy gravity. To honor my family, I lived in the belly of a beast.
I fixed the hearts of iron monsters.
I became a worm in the mud for dignity,
For honor, for righteousness' sake,
for God and country.
I fought for you.
I fought for you. For you. I fought for you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you, and I'd do it again.
This meeting is adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.